The night before D-Day carried a strange kind of silence. The sort that settled over men who knew history was waiting just beyond the horizon. Inside the barracks and staging areas, soldiers tried to distract themselves with jokes, cigarettes, and nervous conversation, but everyone understood what was coming. Among them was Bill Guarnere, one of Easy Company's most fearless and aggressive soldiers, though on that evening there was something heavier hanging over him that he did not yet know. Sergeant John Martin had received a letter from his wife containing terrible news. Bill's younger brother, Henry, had been killed in Italy. Martin wrestled with the burden of how to tell him. The invasion of Normandy was only hours away, and no word seemed right for a moment like that. In the end, unable to face Guarnere directly, Martin quietly slipped the letter into Bill's jacket pocket and left him to discover it on his own. When Guarnere finally read the letter, disbelief washed over him. For a long moment, he simply stared at the words, as though reading them again might somehow change them. As the men prepared to board the waiting C-47 aircraft on June 5, 1944, Martin and Guarnere exchanged only a few quiet words. Bill spoke not of revenge or anger but of his mother, worrying about how she would bear the loss of another son marching toward war. It was a rare glimpse into the softer side of a man who was otherwise known for his toughness and explosive courage in combat. Yet those who knew Bill understood that the news changed him forever. Friends later recalled that from that moment on, Guarnere seemed driven by a singular purpose. He wanted revenge for Henry, and he intended to make the Germans pay for his brother's death. Private First Class Henry J. Guarnere had served with the 47th Armored Medical Battalion of the 1st Armored Division. Like Bill, he had grown up in Pennsylvania, surrounded by sports, rough housing, and the close-knit bond of family. Henry was quieter than his older brother, less wild perhaps, but deeply protective of Bill. Growing up, he often found himself patching up injuries after fights or football games, unknowingly preparing for the role he would later take on the battlefield. After Pearl Harbor, Henry tried to join the Marines, eager to serve like so many young Americans of his generation. He was rejected, however, and instead entered the Army through the draft. There he became a medic, a role that demanded courage of a very different kind. While infantrymen charged enemy positions, medics ran toward the wounded, often unarmed and exposed to the same deadly fire. The 1st Armored Division was thrown into the brutal North African campaign, landing at Oran in November 1942 during Operation Torch. The fighting was fierce and chaotic, with Allied troops clashing against French-Moroccan defenders before eventually pushing eastward into Tunisia to confront the Germans directly. Somewhere in that grinding desert war, Henry Guarnere proved himself under fire. Though much of his story has been lost to history, one act of bravery survived in the form of a Silver Star citation. During a violent artillery barrage, a wounded soldier lay stranded and unable to reach safety. Without hesitation, Henry sprinted through exploding shells and gunfire to reach him. Ignoring his own safety entirely, he remained beside the wounded man until first aid was completed, refusing to leave despite the danger around him. His actions saved the soldier's life. The citation, dated May 7, 1943, painted the picture of a man whose courage came not from glory-seeking, but from instinctive compassion. Months later, in January 1944, Henry was killed in Italy. It is believed he died during the Battle of Monte Porcia, though in Band of Brothers John Martin refers to Monte Cassino instead, likely because the name was more recognizable to audiences. However it happened, the loss devastated his family. One lingering mystery remains how the news took so long to reach Bill in England. It seems almost certain that their mother knew earlier, and perhaps chose to shield her surviving son from the truth until after the invasion. Maybe she hoped to spare him from carrying that grief into Normandy. If so, fate gave Bill only hours between learning of his brother's death and stepping into one of history's bloodiest campaigns. Henry Guarnere was eventually laid to rest at the American cemetery in Nettuno, Italy, among thousands of others who died during the brutal fighting around Anzio and Cassino. Row upon row of white crosses stand there today, silent reminders of young men whose lives ended far from home.